Review Daf Lamed Gimel. Yesterday, the Gemara discussed the machlokes between Abba Shol and the Tanakama. How much truma has to be eaten to trigger the chiyuvim of truma? The Tanakama says it has to be a kezayis. Abba Shol says it has to be a shava pruta. The Gemara introduced us to a brisa that talks about me'ilah. Me'ilah has a asham me'ilah. So if someone is moil b'shoyik, he brings an asham me'ilah, but not b'mezid, and the brisa brings a pasuk to illustrate that. The brisa wants to know why we can't just learn it from all chiyuvei chatos, which are chayve krisos that were done b'shoyik, where you don't bring the korban chatos on a mezid, only on a shoyik. So if chatos, which has a iser chomer, because b'mezid it would be a chiyuv kares, nevertheless you don't bring a carbon for a mezid, me'ilah, which is less severe, it only has misa b'dei shemayim, surely you should not bring an asham me'ilah for a mezid. So the Gemara, or the Brisa, was looking to show an angle where asham me'ilah, where me'ilah would be more chomer than the rest of Isurim, which would justify the pasuk to teach us that an asham me'ilah is not brought for a mezid. Being that the Brisa holds that the Misa, the Oynish for Mezid by Asham Me'ilah is Misa B'dei Shemayim, the Gemara needs to probe, where do we know that from? It doesn't mention anything about Misa B'dei Shemayim in the Parsha of Me'ilah. So the Gemara says, Rebbe teaches us that we learn it out of Truma. By Truma it does say Misa B'dei Shemayim, it says Umesa by Kichalaluhu, and there's a Gzer Shava of Chet from Truma to Me'ilah that teaches us that just like Truma has a Chiyav of Misa B'dei Shemayim by Mezid, so too does Me'ilah. But now that we have Gzer Shava, we have to import all of the halachas that we know by Truma, which means the same achloikas that you have between Abba Shol and the Tanakama of how much Truma has to be eaten to trigger the chayuvim of Truma, that will apply equally to Me'ilah. And therefore, according to Abba Shol, you only have to eat a shava pruta of food to be over Me'ilah and not a kazayis. So now we have an angle where Me'ilah is more chomer than other Isurim. Other Isurim, such as Chelev, you won't trigger any Chiyuv until you eat a Kezayis of it. While by Me'ilah, if you learn like Abba Shol by Truma, which will then be equally by Me'ilah, even if you ate a Shavar Pruta, but it was less than a Kezayis, it would still trigger the Chiyuvim of Me'ilah. So that was one angle where Me'ilah has a Chumrah over the rest of the Isurim. There were two other angles offered. One was Dover She'enim Achavin. An example of Davar She'enim Achavin would be if I have a sickle in my hand and I want to cut off some wheat that was already disconnected from the ground. And by mistake, with my sickle, I cut wheat that was connected to the ground. So my intention was to cut tolish, which is not an isser, and I cut mechuber by mistake. That's called Einim Achavin, and that would be potter. However, if a similar thing happened by hektish, for instance, I wanted to snuggle up to some wool of chulin, and by mistake I snuggled up to wool of hektish instead, there would be a chiv me'ilah. So you see a chumrah by me'ilah over other yisurim. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak felt that the davar she'enim achavin that we just described, where I was trying to cut with a sickle tolish, and I cut mechuber, that would be chayiv by Shabbos and by other yisurim as well, because I intended to do the action of cutting. That's enough to be mechayiv me. However, what if I wasn't planning to cut at all? I just wanted to lift up a bundle of wheat that was already cut, and not realizing that I lifted up a bundle that was connected, and in doing so I ripped it out of the ground. So there my intention wasn't even to do an action that could lead to an isser. That's Einim Achavin, that would be potter by other isurim. However, by Me'ilah, if I was stretching my hand out to reach for something, and inadvertently my elbow touched oil of hektish, and I got moisturized, that's totally inadvertent, there would still be a chiv Me'ilah. So in fact, there are some angles where Me'ilah is more chomer than other isurim. This ends the sugya of Truma and Me'ilah, which are sort of parallel if you learn the Gzer Shava from Truma to Me'ilah, and there would be a shaila, how much of Truma or how much of hektish would you have to eat to trigger the chiyuvim? Is it a kazayis like the Tanakama, or is it a shavar pruta like Abba Shol? Now the Gemara refers back to a comment that we learned in the Brisa on Daf Lamed Beis, and that is that you cannot be mafresh Truma from Chometz. If you're on Pesach and you have tevel that's Chometz, if you try to be mafresh Truma, it will not work. The Gemara wants to know, how do we know that? So the first shot that the Gemara offered was the pasuk of Titein Loi. You have to give your truma to the kohen, and we dashin loy v'loy la'oray. You have to give it to the kohen where he'll be able to use it properly, like eat it. You can't give him something that's just going to lead to him burning. And therefore, by chometz, since if you mafresh the truma and you give it to him, all he'll be able to do with it is burn it. It will not be truma. The Gemara qualifies that by saying that that's only if it didn't have a shasa kosher, meaning if the truma was mechuber or the wheat was mechuber, while it was mechuber, it became chametz. Then you cut it and then you process it, and now the chiyuv for truma gets triggered. As soon as the chiyuv for truma got triggered, as soon as this produce became tevel, it was already chametz. So there was never a time where you could have been mafresh proper truma, and that's where the Torah teaches us that the truma will not work. Rav Huna bar Beshua brought a different suggestion of how we know that. It's because it says Reishis, the Goncha. From Reishis we learn that whatever you separate for truma, the rest of it has to become more mutter. Well, let's think about it. Tevel is asher b'achila mutter b'ana. If you are mafresh truma from tevel that's chametz, that tevel will still be asher b'achila and mutter b'ana according to Rabbi Yossi Glili. So in fact, you haven't improved the tevel, and therefore the truma is not chal. Then the Gemara got into a whole new sugya of tum and tahira. Let me ask you a riddle. If I have a grape that's tamei, how can I get the wine out of that grape, and the wine should be tahar? So the Gemara brought down from Rabbi Yochanan that if you have grapes that are tamei, if you squeeze out the wine from them, but there's less than a kebeya of grape, then the wine will not become tamei. So let's think about this. We know that tumas Michael, tumas oichlin, will only transmit tumah if the transmitter of the tumah is a kebeya. So if I only take grapes and I take them in batches that are less than a kebeya, as I squeeze them, the wine coming out of them will not become tamei from touching those grapes, because those grapes are too small to transmit the tumah to the wine. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Rav Chisda said absolutely not, because Rav Chisda said that the wine that was inside the grape became tamei together with the grape as soon as the grape became tamei. Rabbi Yochanan learns that when you have any juice that's inside a fruit, we don't look at it like it's part and parcel of the fruit, and it became tamei with the fruit when the fruit became tamei. To the contrary, that wine or any juice inside a fruit is perceived like it's in a jar, but it's distinct from the peri. And therefore, although the peri became tamei, the wine inside it did not become tamei. The only way for the wine inside it to become tamei is once the wine is squeezed out and released, it would be mekabel tumah because it touched the fruit that was tamei. But if you only squeeze out the wine in batches that are less than a kebeya, there's no way for that wine to become tamei. Again, Rabbi Yochanan argues, I'm sorry, not Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Chisda argued on Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Chisda holds that the wine is part of the grape, and therefore the wine did become tamei in the grape. Now, this takes us to another halacha that we learned, and that we learned that tusum and anovim, grapes and berries, the Brisa says there's no heter achila for them. They cannot become muter b'achila, truma tmeya. That's tusum v'anovim. There's no way you can ever eat them. The problem is according to the way Rabbi Yochanan learns, that you can extract the juice from them without the juice becoming tamei. Why is it that you cannot have any achila out of grapes that are tamei or berries that are tamei? So Rava explained that that's only because of a gzera. Chulin, if you had regular chulin, you could squeeze that grape out, and the wine that comes out of it will not become tamei. But by truma, we don't want you to do that, because if you save these grapes because you plan to squeeze them, while you're squeezing them, you might eat one. And since we're choshesh l'takala, we don't allow you to squeeze the juice out of pairs of truma that are tamei, which led to a new discussion of are we choshesh l'takala. So the Gemara said it all depends. For instance, if you have oil that's lying around that's tamei, I'm allowed to save it in order to use it to light fires with, because I'm not going to store it in a clean vessel. I'll store it in a smelly, dirty vessel, so no one will eat from it by mistake. Same thing with bread. If I want to use bread of truma that's tamei, and I want to use it just as firewood, if I just throw it amongst the firewood and it gets all dirty, no one's going to bother eating it, and therefore there's no reason to be worried l'takala. However, if I keep fruits around because I plan to squeeze them and get the juice out of them, it's possible that while I'm squeezing the grapes, I might eat from the fruits. That's where we're choshesh l'takala, and therefore we don't allow you to keep fruits of truma that are tamei around in order to squeeze out their juice. And even oil, you'd have to store in a dirty keli, not in a clean keli, or bread that you wanted to burn, you'd have to throw it amongst your wood and not store it on the shelf, because otherwise we would be choshesh l'takala.